At my husband's friend's party, right there on the brightly lit dance floor, I leaned in to kiss him. He recoiled like he'd been electrocuted, his voice sharp enough for the whole room to hear. "Don't touch me! Stay away from me!" The laughter erupted like a pack of wolves catching their prey. I smiled like it didn't hurt, like that sentence was just a harmless joke. I swallowed the humiliation in silence, and when I finally spoke, the room fell dead quiet. Before we go any further, thank you for being here with me today. If you believe that publicly humiliating your wife is never acceptable and that every person deserves respect, please hit subscribe. It's free and it helps this story reach more people. Remember, if anyone asks what you do, just say you're a housewife. Lucas told me that just a few hours earlier, while I was zipping up the evening gown I chose, an emerald green dress that costs almost as much as most people's rent for a month. Don't mention you're an investor. Don't talk about the fund or the numbers. People don't want to hear about that at parties. He spoke to me like he was editing a PowerPoint presentation, not talking to his wife. 5 years ago, he used to brag to his friends that he married a wealthy woman who supported him through his early days of building a business. Now my wealth had become something he wanted to hide, like an unnecessary detail in a resume that needed deleting. I folded the cheap dress he chose, the one that would prove I was a dependent wife, and instead put on the expensive one. Just smile and say, "I stay home and take care of the house." "That's enough. The other wives don't need to flaunt what they do," Lucas said, while adjusting his tie in front of the mirror, his eyes never landing on me. Once he trained me like this before every gathering, with his successful circle of friends, as if I were a new hire needing onboarding, so I wouldn't embarrass him. He'd list every guest, their job titles, companies, make me repeat them. Who's in M&A, who's in private equity, who's just old money, tagging along. Don't confuse mergers and acquisitions with private equity again. And Jenkins' wife is Lydia, not Linda. You got that wrong last time. I wanted to tell him I've been calling her Lydia for 3 years, and that the Linda slip came from his own mouth last Christmas. But in his script, I no longer had the right to correct him. Lucas continued his usual preparation routine, checking the mirror, pulling his tie, adjusting his collar, smoothing his hair, then repeating all of it. He checked his collar at least 17 times. Yes, I counted. Counting his size, counting each frown over a wrinkle in the fabric. It was easier than thinking about how far we'd drifted in this marriage. Each time he fixed something on himself, I felt like he was also editing the version of Claire he wanted to bring to the party. Quieter, blander, less. Me? More obedient. "The Jenkinses will be there," Lucas went on, eyes still locked on his phone. "Remember, he's in M&A, and Grayson's coming too. I told him we'd talk more tonight about that riverfront real estate deal. And remember, don't talk about your financial expertise. The other wives don't need to bring up data, profits, or cash flow. If you start talking deal structure, they'll feel uncomfortable." I bit the inside of my cheek, trying not to say, "I just closed an $8 billion deal today. Lucas. A deal I spent 2 years negotiating, saving a family-run company from being swallowed whole and using part of the profit to launch a fund supporting 2 single mothers starting their own businesses." To me, that meant more than any party. But to Lucas, it was not what the wives of his friends should be talking about. He finally put down his phone, and for the first time that night, looked at me, through the mirror, not directly. No one wants to hear about investments, equity percentages, or valuations at a party. It's suffocating. Just talk about light stuff, the new kitchen, vacation spots, nice views. And if you absolutely must mention money, just say, "My husband's in finance. I don't really understand it. I just take care of the house." That's what makes you like the other wives. 5 years of school, 10 years of building wealth, dozens of deals where I risked my name and money to enter. And he wanted me to shrink it all down to, "I stay home and take care of the house." My phone buzzed. A message from the fund management team. One of the single moms I'd supported had just opened her small cafe. She sent a photo. A few wooden tables still smelling of paint, a handwritten opening day sign taped to the glass. "If it weren't for you, I probably would have quit," she wrote. I looked at the photo, saw two little kids playing in the corner, hands sticky with ice cream, faces beaming. That message, that picture, it meant more to me than any fancy party invite. But according to Lucas's rules, I wasn't allowed to mention it. It would ruin the image of the wife who depends on her husband. He'd worked so hard to curate. "Oh, and one more thing," Lucas said, this time actually making eye contact with me through the mirror, but still not turning to face me. "Grayson asked about the Hamilton Charity Gala next month. I told him we're buying a table, $100,000. It's important for visibility." $100,000 for his visibility. Meanwhile, the women's startup fund I was quietly financing still needed $70,000 to finish the year's programs. Shared money, of course. There was always money for Lucas to save face, but when it came to what I believed in, it was always, "We'll revisit that later." "Ready?" he asked, but he'd already stepped out the door, assuming I'd follow like some decorative accessory that could walk. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual, not because of its speed, but because every second was filled with Lucas continuing to coach me like I was preparing to play a role in the movie of his life. "Make sure you compliment the right people. Tom just closed a real estate deal last week, but don't dig too deep, he's the braggy type. And steer clear of Michelle if she starts drinking. She loves running her mouth about people's business." I nodded at the right moments, like a reflex that had been programmed into me. But my mind wasn't there. I was thinking about the single mothers who once held my hands and cried over the small capital I gave them, just enough to open a shop, feed their kids, and see a brighter future. That felt real to me. This elevator ride was just the entrance to a stage where I had to shrink myself down to fit the role. When we arrived at Grayson's building, the valet took our keys. Lucas's hand on my back as we walked into the lobby wasn't affection. It was placement, like he was positioning me to look like the perfect wife standing just right, just poised. "Smile tonight," he whispered in my ear. "These people matter. My career depends on them." His career, never ours. The elevator doors opened straight into the penthouse, and I could practically see Lucas flip a switch. His shoulders squared, smile clicked into that perfect angle, voice dropped to that confident tone like he'd become the best version of himself in 2 seconds. "Grayson!" he called out, exuberant, dropping my hand to launch into that exaggerated handshake he always used around crowds. "Lucas and Claire." Grayson tacked on my name like a footnote, a line at the bottom of the page. His eyes glanced over me for a fraction of a second, maybe because of the dress, then moved on in search of someone more important. Jennifer came over with a champagne glass and 2 perfectly placed air kisses. "Claire, darling, you look fabulous. That dress is stunning. Lucas has great taste." Sweet words, but the knife went straight to my chest. Everything I wore that night, the dress, the shoes, my hair, was credited to Lucas's taste, like I was a doll he picked accessories for. When Grayson asked what I'd been up to lately, Lucas cut in so fast it sounded like brakes screeching. "Claire's at home, full-time." One sentence erased the fact that I had just closed the biggest investment deal of the quarter, made more money than him this year, and was currently running 3 community fund initiatives. All boiled down to, stays at home. I stood in a crowded room, holding a glass of champagne I didn't want, listening to them talk about stocks, markets, interest rates, things I probably understood better than they did. But my heart was somewhere else, with my 2 daughters, Violet, 10, and Sienna, 7. Their faces at the kitchen table doing homework, their laughter, the way they wrapped their arms around me when I came home late. All of it reminded me of who I was, before walking into this room and being reduced to someone's accessory. I looked around. Lucas was laughing with Grayson, leaning in to whisper something to Bradley, completely unaware that I was standing alone. And I made a decision. Tonight, I would try one last time. One last attempt to see if I could still reach the part of the man I once chose. If it failed, at least I would know I tried. And after that, I wouldn't hold on anymore. Here is the answer. The lights dimmed, and a slow piano melody began to play, almost identical to the one that opened our wedding 5 years ago at the Vine Pearl Hotel. Not the exact same song, but close enough to make my chest tighten. That night, at 2 a.m., Lucas had pulled me onto the empty dance floor, both of us barefoot, drunk on champagne and drunk on the future. "We're going to have a beautiful life," he whispered in my ear, the warmth of the alcohol in his breath. "Kids? A house with a garden? Sunday mornings on the porch drinking coffee and reading the paper? All of it. We'll have all of it." That memory pushed me forward before reason could stop me. My hand touched his elbow, the expensive, smooth fabric of his suit slipping under my fingers. The conversation between him, Bradley, and a guest suddenly paused. Bradley glanced at me with open annoyance. The guest looked confused. And Lucas? His jaw clenched tight, the familiar sign that I'd broken a rule. "Dance with me," I said, the words coming out smaller than I expected, sounding more like pleading than an invitation. Lucas's eyes flicked quickly across his colleagues, calculating the damage refusing would look bad, accepting would waste networking time. He chose the least damaging route. "Excuse me for a moment," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Duty calls." Duty. At some point, I had become a duty. His hand rested on my waist, exactly the kind of hand placement that looks right in photos, not 1 inch closer. We started to dance, but it felt like two strangers rehearsing an old step routine. My hand on his shoulder met stiff fabric, and his body held itself at a precise distance, like there was a wall between us. "The Patterson deal looks promising," Lucas said in a flat tone, his eyes staring somewhere over my shoulder, probably tracking who was talking to whom, what connections were forming in his absence. "Yeah, sounds good," I whispered, trying to draw him a little closer, trying to find a trace of warmth in the man who once danced with me until sunrise. But his body resisted, every muscle telling me he was just waiting for the music to end. His fingers tapped lightly on my waist with impatient rhythm. His feet moved like they were already planning their exit. Around us, other couples swayed gently in each other's arms. Jennifer had her arms around Grayson's neck, her shoes tossed somewhere, laughing out loud. As he whispered something in her ear, Sarah and Tyler were almost still, foreheads touching, like the entire room had disappeared. Even the older couples danced with a tender familiarity I could no longer reach. The music, the golden lights, the old memories stirred up a fragile, dangerous hope inside me. Maybe if I tried one more time, just once, maybe I could touch the version of Lucas from years ago. I looked at those women kissing their husbands on the cheek, saw Tyler gently fix Sarah's hair, saw them existing inside tiny bubbles of happiness I'd somehow lost along the way. I leaned in. Not a dramatic move, not a deep dip, just a soft kiss, the kind husbands and wives share when the music slows and the lights go warm, a kiss that says, "We're still here, still us, we still can." But the moment I leaned in, Lucas jerked back so hard a few people turned to look. His face twisted, not in surprise, but in disgust. Real, raw disgust, like I had done something filthy to him. "Get away from me! You smell like grease!" he said loud enough to cut through the music. The laughter hit instantly, shrill and mean. Jennifer covered her mouth, but her eyes sparkled with delight. Bradley even clapped, like Lucas had just told a joke they'd been waiting for all night. Every laugh was its own knife, sinking into me. I stood there, in a dress worth more than any of their monthly paychecks, and somehow I was the joke in this beautiful room. In the sound of laughter shattering around me like broken glass, every red flag I had tried so hard not to see suddenly lined up into a parade I could no longer avoid. The anniversary dinner canceled because of a last-minute meeting that Instagram later proved had never existed. The 2 separate bedrooms, temporarily, because he was stressed during audit season, a season that had lasted 8 months, the sickly sweet perfume on his shirt that I never wore. The strange charges on his credit card explained with 2 words: client entertainment. The way he no longer said "I love you" first, only echoed it back to me when I said it, like a mechanical reflex. Even the weekend time with our kids had begun to disappear. I stood there in my dress, surrounded by laughter sharp as blades, and suddenly saw with painful clarity that I had been trying to resuscitate a marriage that had died long ago. I had been blowing air into something that had already stopped breathing, not realizing it had started to rot. Something shifted inside my chest, like a tectonic plate sliding out of its old place. The humiliation still burned hot, but under it, something else rose. Cold, sharp, and fully aware of the difference between being hurt and being destroyed. They were still laughing, but I wasn't breaking anymore. That was when Sloane, Lucas's closest friend, the one I always sensed disliked me but never said it outright, walked up, smirked, and delivered her verdict. "Claire, you're not the kind of woman who meets Lucas's standards." The smile that formed on my lips was just a very slight curve at the corner. Not the polite smile I had rehearsed hundreds of times at events like this. Not the diplomatic smile I used in boardrooms. This was something else. Deeper, darker. And I saw the laughter around me start to falter, wobble, then go out like a flame starved of oxygen. Sloane froze. Grayson lowered his glass. Bradley stopped laughing before he even understood why. "You're right," I said, my voice steady, like I was reading a conclusion in a meeting. "I don't meet his standards." Lucas smiled in triumph, convinced I was finally bowing my head. Bradley clicked his tongue in approval at him. Grayson even raised his glass as if to toast Lucas's moment of taming his wife. They thought they were witnessing my final humiliation, my full surrender. His standards require someone who doesn't know about the Fitzgerald account, right? The sentence fell lightly, like a surgical instrument hitting a stainless steel tray. Lucas's face drained instantly, his smugness sucked out as if someone had pulled a plug. His eyes shot to Bradley, then snapped back to me, panicked. The room went so silent I could hear ice clinking in someone's glass. "What are you talking about?" Lucas's voice had lost all its usual confidence, leaving only trembling behind. I slowly pulled my phone out of my clutch. The tiny device suddenly felt as heavy as a gun that had been loaded since the beginning of the night. I looked straight at Lucas, and for the first time that evening, my smile made him flinch half a breath. "Your standard," I said, voice even and cold like a glass tabletop, "is a woman who accepts that every month, for 8 months straight, you've been transferring $5,000 like clockwork into a very poetic name, Apex Property Holdings, LLC. The entire room froze. The laughter died out like someone had pulled the plug. "This company," I continued, "was registered in North Carolina 6 months ago. Legal representative, Lucas Winters." Sloane, who had been standing behind Grayson, turned so pale her lipstick looked like it wanted to slide off her face. "This company," I said slowly, "owns exactly one asset. A luxury apartment in the heart of Chapel Hill. The kind of place wellness coaches love to post matcha selfies from on Instagram." I turned my head toward Sloane. No need to say her name. "The leaseholder of that apartment, Sloane Whitaker." No one in the room dared to breathe loudly. Bradley swallowed so audibly it sounded like a pen click. Jennifer had her hand over her mouth, but her eyes were wide, lit up like she was watching live drama unfold. "In total," I continued, $16,000 pulled from our joint marital account. You labeled it as client relationship development expense." I let out a soft laugh. "And there was definitely a relationship being developed, just not the kind that needed to be disclosed to your legal wife." Sloane staggered a step. Grayson set his glass down without taking his eyes off Lucas. He looked like he wanted to jump out of his own suit. "But that's not even the best part," I said, my voice so steady even I was surprised. "In those 6 months, the kids' retirement, trust, and college funds all went short by $43,000. Lucas let out a sharp breath, loud like a chair dragging across the floor. 3 withdrawals, I listed. All deposited into… Anyone care to guess? I raised an eyebrow. Apex Property Holdings, LLC. You took money from your children's future, I said softly, to bankroll a mistress or a cheap friend. No one said anything. No one moved. Somewhere at the back of the room, someone's glass was trembling in their hand. I stood there, calm like I was reading out financial audit results. No more shaking, no more pain. Just the truth, icy, blazing, and undeniable, standing on my side. You're talking about your standards? I continued, my voice slicing through the thick air like a scalpel. Your standards also include Sloan, don't they? The room erupted in choked whispers. Sloan stood frozen, her face pale like smudged foundation under the lights. Lucas flinched for just a beat, his eyes snapping toward her so fast he didn't have time to cover it up. That's right. I nodded slightly. The woman you said you were mentoring. The one you told me to have empathy for, because she was struggling without her husband's support. Davis, Sloane's husband, turned to look at his wife, his eyes wide, like someone had just sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Mentoring. That kind of help? I asked, my voice light like I was talking about the weather. And you had the nerve to use your children's money to fund your mistress's career path. No one moved. Even breathing felt too loud in the air that had turned suffocating. I unlocked my phone. The screen lit up like a loaded pistol in the hands of someone humiliated enough to be dangerous. Let me read a few things out loud, just so we're all clear, I said, scrolling to the file I'd saved, a message sent to his sweet little lover, just 3 hours ago. I cleared my throat and read each word. Can't wait to get out of this boring party, only here to see you. Same place. I looked back at my husband, feigning curiosity. Which same place in this mansion were the two of you planning to use? Jennifer screamed, She was at my house last week for football night. She went to my bathroom 3 times. Sloan choked. Grayson looked at Sloan, then at Lucas, then down at his glass like he was about to throw it at someone's face. I kept going, opening another message. And here, last Tuesday. My wife is so pathetic. She actually thinks I'm working late. The silence exploded. Then, smack! Davis slapped Sloan so hard she stumbled back, hand to her cheek, eyes brimming with tears. The room couldn't breathe. Lucas's face had lost all color. He lunged toward me, hand reaching out to snatch the phone like a cornered animal. But I shifted slightly to the side, just enough for him to miss and nearly fall into the buffet table. I stepped closer, just close enough so no one else could hear, and said in a voice so cold it raised goosebumps on his skin. Does your mother know? You transferred the lake house into her name? Lucas froze, his face drained of color in a single instant. I smiled, slowly, like someone who just pressed a blade into the softest part of the flesh. Yeah, I found it. The quitclaim deed you filed last month. The house worth nearly $300,000, the one your dad left you before he passed. I tilted my head. Your separate property, but you transferred it to your mom to hide it before leaving your wife. Smart, but not smart enough. Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it again, just like a fish flailing on dry land. He stammered, Claire, let me explain. No need, I cut him off. There are only 2 options now. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder, straightened his collar, the kind of posture that made the whole room feel off balance. I smoothed it like I was adjusting his tie. The easy way, you move out tonight, we divorce, split assets, relatively fairly. I emphasized each word, I keep the house, and I take 70% of what's left, after subtracting everything you funneled into your cheap little friend. Lucas's eyes widened. That's not fair. You don't get to use that word, I said, my voice light as air. The hard way, I continued, is I report everything I've found to the IRS, to your company, and to anyone who might care about a CEO siphoning off his kids' college and retirement funds to support a mistress. I held up my phone and turned the screen toward him. Draft email to compliance department. His work email address lit up on the screen like a blade. Go ahead, I said. Try me. See if I won't hit send. Lucas collapsed into a chair, his face buried in both hands. Just minutes ago, he was standing in this very room, laughing at me, while the others clapped along to the public humiliation he threw at his wife's face. And now, he was curled up, small and pitiful, as if the expensive suit he wore belonged to another man, not the trembling one slouched in front of me. The click of my heels on the marble floor was the only sound left as I walked toward the door. Each step slow, deliberate, steady. The crowd parted automatically, like water around a rock. Some stared at me in shock, others with a look that mixed awe and fear. At the threshold of the penthouse, I turned back one last time. The chaos was beautiful. The kings and queens of trust funds were now screaming, pointing fingers, unraveling like a collapsing market. The whole social architecture they had spent years building with money and pretense was crumbling, piece by piece, every time another secret was dragged into the light, and right in the center, my husband. No, the man about to be my ex-husband, slumped in a chair, face in hands, finally tasting what it feels like to be stripped and humiliated in front of everyone he once thought mattered. I pushed the door open and stepped into the hallway. My heels continued their sharp rhythm on the marble. Behind me, shouting still echoed. A sofa dragged harshly across the floor. Jennifer's shrill voice slicing the air demanding answers. But ahead, there was only silence, and the polished elevator door at the end of the corridor. I pressed the call button. My hand didn't shake, even though the adrenaline was fading fast, leaving a hollow chill in my chest. The elevator chimed softly, far too gently for what had just happened. I stepped in. The doors closed. Just me now and 4 mirrored walls, reflecting a woman in an emerald silk dress. Eyes strangely bright, I gave myself exactly 30 seconds. 30 seconds to let my shoulders tremble, my breath stutter, the tears rise but not fall. 28, 29, 30. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I'd known since college. Veronica speaking. Her voice came through, short, sharp, as always. It's Claire. I need a family lawyer, right now. I summarized everything in 30 seconds flat. Shell LLC. Mistress's condo. Kids' college fund drained. Lake house transferred to mother-in-law. A pause on the other end. Monday, Raleigh, face-to-face, Veronica said, her tone already shifting into fight mode. Send all documents tonight through secure mail. And Claire, I'm proud of you for finally waking up. The elevator doors opened to the ground floor. I walked out, shoulders square, a small but certain smile on my face. The real war was just beginning. Lucas left the house the next morning with 2 suitcases and a face that had completely collapsed. He went to his mother's. Of course, when a man gets caught by his wife draining their kid's college fund to pay for his mistress's apartment, the only refuge he's got left is always his mother's arms. I gave him the entire weekend to think about his options, which, in hindsight, was too generous, because the truth is, his options only ranged from bad to catastrophic. But what Lucas didn't know was this. I wasn't just angry. I was systematic. And when a woman is both angry and systematic, especially the kind of woman who keeps every receipt in a blue folder placed in the exact corner of her desk, it's no different than a legal assassin holding an Excel spreadsheet. All weekend, while the kids were off playing with friends, I did what I do best. Audit my husband's entire financial life Saturday morning. I started with the basics. 2 years of bank statements, credit card records, PayPal, Venmo, even Cash App. The one he thought I didn't notice because it's just for golf buddies. Good news for the universe. Lucas has never once played golf. The transfers were all there. Brunch, yoga, even ridiculous things like $250 per session for chakra alignment. At that price, her chakras better glow like runway lights. By the afternoon, I had a spreadsheet that could make any forensic accountant weep with joy. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every business expense that was actually boutique lingerie from Durham. Not my size, obviously. And then I found the most interesting thing: Lucas's work email. He was stupid enough to sync his company email to our home computer. The same one I set up, I opened it. And it turns out my husband didn't just betray our marriage. He also committed financial fraud against his own company. Lucas had set up a fake vendor under Apex Property Holdings LLC, inflated equipment prices, skimmed commissions from contracts. Small stuff, just a few percent each time. But over 8 months, it added up to $70,000 or $80,000, I laughed. That kind of laugh that slips out when you suddenly realize your life has turned into a true crime podcast. Sunday morning, I met with Veronica, my college roommate, now a family lawyer in Raleigh. We'd kept in touch through Christmas cards and the occasional brunch squeezed in between kids' tutoring schedules. We met at a cafe in Raleigh. I brought 3 thick file folders, color-tabbed, perfectly organized. Veronica opened the first one, flipped through a few pages and looked up. "Claire, this is emotionally moving. I don't often say that about financial documentation." I shrugged. "If you're going to war, bring the receipts." Veronica closed the folder, smiled with ice in her voice. "We're not just going to war. We're about to orchestrate a legal massacre." Then she laid out the strategy. File for divorce on grounds of infidelity. Petition for sole ownership of the house. Majority of assets. Full custody of the kids. Demand Lucas repay all money spent on his mistress and the initial investment I made into his business. Ask the court to void the lake house title transfer to his mom as fraudulent asset hiding. When I asked about reporting him to the company, Veronica tilted her head. "Embezzlement's a criminal matter." I said, "I know. I'm not someone who enjoys destroying people, but Lucas stole from our children's future." I took a deep breath. "I want to hold that as a card. If he signs the agreement quietly, I won't burn it all down. But if he fights, I'll burn everything." "You're officially my new favorite client," Veronica said. That night, I sat down with the kids, the hardest part. "Mom and Dad are getting divorced," I said plainly. Violet looked up from her phone. "Because of the thing where Dad kissed Miss Sloane, right?" Of course she knew kids always know. I said, "Because of a lot of things, but it's not your fault." Sienna asked softly, "Is Dad coming back?" "He'll visit, but he won't live here anymore." Violet jumped in, deadpan. "Good. He's been acting weird for a while." We talked for almost an hour. I answered as much as I could without making Lucas sound like a burning trash heap. That night, after the kids were asleep, I opened a bottle of red wine, sat down in front of my laptop, and typed the name I had tried not to think about all weekend. Sloane Whitaker from Jackson, Mississippi. Moved to Chapel Hill last year. Wellness entrepreneur. Living my best life. Namaste. Her public profile read, full of yoga pictures, green smoothies, and quotes like, "Attract abundance," and "Manifest your destiny," and photos where her husband had been erased, replaced by shots with Lucas. Not many, but enough for me to see everything I needed. Photos where half a man's face was conveniently cropped out, but the Tag Heuer watch I gave him for his birthday, the scar on his chin, that familiar hand, and the wedding ring that had disappeared. All of it, there in plain sight, like some kind of joke. I clicked over to Sloane's Wellness Journey, a life coaching nutrition consultation, aqua fitness service, starting price, $150 per session. I did the math. If she had 10 regular clients a week, she could probably scrape by, but nowhere near enough to afford a luxury apartment in the center of Chapel Hill. The apartment I had just confirmed was leased in her name, fully funded. No more doubt, Lucas had bankrolled his mistress's dream life with our family's money. On July 9th, Veronica filed the divorce petition Lucas was served at the luxury apartment in Chapel Hill, the place that once hosted his affair, now his post-downfall crash pad. That afternoon, my phone rang nonstop. 17 missed calls from Lucas I didn't answer. Let him drown in the hole he dug. The next day, while I was in a client meeting, Violet texted me, Dad came by. He cried super weird. I called Lucas back, voice cold as a blade. You have 5 minutes to leave the house before I call the cops for trespassing. He started stammering apologies, said he wanted to talk, to fix things. I cut him off. Your mistakes, plural. And no, we're not fixing anything. Sign the divorce papers. Make it easy. Lucas said he couldn't afford the financial terms I requested. I replied flatly, then get another job or ask Sloane how much she's got left after her divorce. He hung up. The next afternoon, a strange number called. I almost didn't pick up, but something in my gut told me to answer. Mrs. Caldwell, this is David Fletcher from Compliance at Modern Nashville. We'd like to schedule a meeting regarding some irregular spending tied to your husband's authorizations. I smiled. Someone had finally found the breadcrumb trail Lucas left behind. I'm available, I said. And I have some information I think may be helpful to your investigation. The meeting took place on July 16th in a conference room that smelled of corporate anxiety and overpriced coffee. Fletcher, around 40, mildly balding, the kind of face that's seen too many grown executives behave like toddlers. He was joined by Simone from HR and Pierce, a company lawyer who looked like he charges $600 an hour just to breathe. I brought 3 color-tabbed folders, and Veronica. Fletcher began. Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Cald. I cut in. Ms. Ramsey, I'm using my maiden name, just call me Claire. Veronica gave a slight nod. Perfect direction, separating me from the image of Lucas's wife. I was my own person, with my own career, finances, and a perfectly organized set of folders. Fletcher continued. We're in the middle of a routine audit and have uncovered irregularities in your ex-husband, I corrected, or soon to be. Fletcher's eyebrows lifted. Understood. That's relevant. They explained. Lucas had routed equipment transactions through an LLC called Meridian Property Solutions. I opened folder 2, tab C, and slid it across the table. Apex Property Holdings LLC, registered by Lucas on November 18th of last year. He's the sole member the company owns one asset, a luxury apartment in downtown Chapel Hill, leased by his mistress, and he used that LLC to inflate equipment costs and pocket the difference. I estimate he skimmed around $75,000 to $80,000 over 8 months. The room went dead silent. The air conditioner suddenly seemed loud. Pierce started scribbling furiously. Simone's mouth was hanging open. Fletcher looked at me like Christmas had come early. Would you be willing to provide copies of these documents? Of course, I said, but on one condition. Veronica placed her hand gently over mine. Pierce asked, What condition? I want to know what the company plans to do. I need assurances that my children and I won't be legally or financially implicated in his idiocy. Simone took a sharp breath. We'll be terminating Lucas's employment immediately, and we'll be forwarding the case to local authorities due to clear indications of criminal conduct, wire fraud, embezzlement, potentially more. I nodded. Good. Because he also withdrew $43,000 from my daughter's college fund to pay for his mistress's apartment, so I hope the company understands if I'm not exactly feeling protective. But you also know this scandal could reflect badly on your firm, and the money I invested in it. Veronica slid another file across the table. Documentation of the original investment Lucas borrowed, including message history. Fletcher gave a real smile. Ms. Ramsey will be discussing that equity stake with you further. We spent 2 hours going through every document, every transaction, every email. Pierce took notes like he was drafting a will. Fletcher looked positively radiant, like a compliance officer who just hit the jackpot. Outside that boardroom, I knew Lucas was about to get the news, and this time nothing would be there to shield him. That night, Veronica called me just before 6 p.m., her voice ringing out like a victory bulletin. Claire, he's been fired. The company escorted him out of the building this afternoon, and listen to this. They're demanding he pay damages. Total amount? 6 figures. I raised an eyebrow. Can he afford that? Veronica laughed, a sound sharp as a blade. Claire, he can't even afford a decent attorney. Lucas's mother just called my office to beg for a negotiation. She's finally realized that transferring the lake house into her name could make her legally liable. I let out a polite "oh," without an ounce of sympathy inside. The divorce paperwork moved faster than I expected. Lucas didn't have the money to drag anything out. When you've committed financial fraud and lost your job, your choices aren't bad or less bad anymore. They're terrible and catastrophic. His lawyer advised, sign the favorable divorce settlement to show goodwill. I didn't see it as goodwill. It was just that he was out of options. By mid-August, we reached the final agreement. I kept the house. I kept 70% of all remaining assets. I kept both cars. I had primary custody of the children. Lucas was granted supervised visitation only. Child support and alimony would be deducted directly from any future income he earned. The transfer of the lake house to his mother was ruled invalid by the court. Deemed asset concealment, the property was sold, and all the proceeds were placed into the children's college fund, fully restoring what Lucas had taken, including interest. The shares he held were returned to me through a silent agreement to spare him criminal charges and to protect the company's reputation. The lost funds were recovered. Lorraine, my ex-mother-in-law, cut all contact with me. Honestly, that was the most beautiful gift from this whole mess. No more Thanksgiving dinners dripping in sarcasm where she asked when I'd give her a real grandchild. As if Violet and Sienna were faulty prototypes, Lucas lost all his money, his status, and now carries a criminal record strong enough to erase his career for good. And Sloane? She got divorced, moved back to Mississippi in September. Her Instagram went dark. I checked. I'm petty, not a saint. Last I saw, she was teaching water aerobics at a small gym. Full circle. Fitting in a strange way. And my life, finally, opened onto a path that was cleaner and brighter than anything I left behind. When everything settled, I realized my 2 kids had adapted faster than I expected. Violet, with her clear 10-year-old eyes, said something light as a breeze but strong enough to erase all the nights I blamed myself. I'm not that sad, Mom. Dad chose that, didn't he? And Sienna, the girl who used to curl into a corner every time her grandmother came over, one night let out a quiet sigh and whispered, "Our house. It breathes easier without Dad." A sentence that sounded like a truth long locked away, finally allowed to step out into the open. And me, in the ruins of the old marriage, I started to see a new path. I launched a financial consulting service for people going through divorce, partnered with Veronica. She's the lawyer, I'm the CPA, like 2 sharp blades cutting through webs of deceit for our clients, passing case files back and forth, like soldiers in a war we understood better than anyone. It was the first Christmas without Lucas, but also the first one we didn't have to pretend. I sat on the sofa, my 2 kids wrapped in blankets, all 3 of us in pajamas, watching Home Alone, steaming mugs of hot chocolate in hand, the Christmas lights flickering softly in time with the children's laughter. I felt my heart soften, like this house, for the first time, could exhale without bracing itself for anyone. On New Year's Eve, I stood on the porch, watching fireworks burst and fade, remembering the night I was humiliated in front of everyone. But this time, my lips curled into a real smile, no longer trembling. My phone buzzed. A message from Veronica. "Happy New Year, you magnificent shark." I smiled and replied, "Brunch on me." And I realized that freedom doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it's simply the quiet act of balancing your life's ledger again, clean, neat, and fully in your own hands. 8 months later, I stopped checking Sloane's Instagram. Those things had become as meaningless as an old, worn-out page, and spent my time working. Helped 11 people uncover hidden assets, became a quiet little legend. The woman with 3 folders who destroyed a man's entire life with spreadsheets. I repainted Lucas's old office into a reading room, changed the bedroom furniture, planted a small garden with the kids out front. A tiny symbol of a home that had become so much lighter, I learned that you can live 10 years with someone and still never truly know who they are. That the deepest wounds aren't always from cheating, but from financial deceit, from cold lies crafted like long-term projects. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I ever thought, that I could turn life's worst slap into a chance to stand taller, live better, and give my children a home without the sound of silent suffering. I don't need a new man to feel complete. I have 2 kids, I have my work, I have my morning coffee, those random Target runs where I buy throw pillows that make no sense but somehow bring joy. And most importantly, I have peace. I'm not ruling out love again, but if it happens, that man will need to show me his credit score, financial reports, pay stubs, and he'll have to understand that's normal. And if no one shows up, I'll still be okay. Better than ever. And if I could leave you with anything after telling this story, it would be this. Marry someone who respects you, but more importantly, respect yourself enough to leave when they no longer do. And always keep your receipts, records, evidence, not just to protect your finances, but to remind yourself that the truth always speaks in its own time. Because in the end, peace isn't something you're handed. It's something you build with your own 2 hands, page by page. The way I learned to rewrite my life from the pieces I once thought were too broken to fit.